now I'd like to introduce Roderick, an AV-88 Harrier squadron stationed out of MCS Yuma, Arizona. His account is very important. Thank you, Roderick.
Hello. My name is Roger John Castle III, and I'm prepared to repeat this testimony before Congress or any other legal body. From 1994 to 1999, I served as an aviation ordnance marine with VMA 513, the Flying Nightmares, Navy AV Harrier Squadron out of Yuma, Arizona. I was an E5 sergeant, leading teams of Marines responsible for the weapons systems and crash response. I deployed aboard the U.S. Bella Wood and USS Essex. After active duty, I continued serving in the New York Army National Guard and the Air National Guard. And in the aftermath of September 11th, I participated in air defense operations around New York City. In 1997, during an exercise in the California desert near 29 Palms Marine Corps Air Station, I encountered something outside standard military practices and technology. 6 of our VMA 513 Harrier jets were attached to a special purpose Marine Air Ground Task Force, participating in what was called the Hunter Warrior Advanced Warfighting Experiment. On March 10th or 11th, my team were sent out by the airfield tower to investigate unidentified aerial activity, possibly flares. Myself and 4 Marines headed to the identified spot near Emerson Dry Lake Bed. As we came over a hill approximately 10 miles outside of the main base, we witnessed a large, flat, black mass hovering above the desert floor. It was silent, triangular, approximately 300 feet in length, and it hung in the air roughly 150 to 200 feet above. With no visible propulsion and no heat signature consistent with known aircraft. There were spherical yellow-white lights embedded in each point of the triangle. The lights were not bright, and the center of the triangle was possibly concave. This is all I was able to observe in those few seconds. On the ground, approximately 200 feet down the hill, were 3 black F-150, 350 type unmarked vehicles, and 20 to 30 men armed with rifles and sidearms, dressed in black tactical gear, no insignia, no identifiers. We skidded our Humvee and crash response trailer to a stop and were quickly overtaken by 5 of the men who ran up toward us in an arrowhead formation. Aviation ordnance Marines do not carry our M16s on us. Our weapons were in the back on a rack. So we were quickly overtaken. We were ordered out of the vehicle with rifles pointed at our heads, pushed against the truck in order to look at the ground. These men had American accents. I knew that at any moment we could be shot in the head and erased in the desert. Approximately 2 to 3 minutes later, in my peripheral vision, I perceived the triangle craft arc upward and then accelerate to the northwest at an incredible speed. The men ran back to their vehicles and the entire team drove away quickly in the same general direction as the triangle. The Humvee would not restart for 5 minutes. Some battery power, but the engine would not turn over. Upon returning to the base, we were relieved of duty before the shift was over and ordered to return to our group sleeping area. We were met there by our acting staff sergeant and a warrant officer. The intention was clear. They were there to check on us and to follow orders given from above. We were asked about the flares and we reported that we saw nothing. Myself and my fellow Marines did not discuss the experience. I only received a silent, "What the F?" from my corporal. The sense was we had seen something we should not have seen, that we could have and could still be killed or reprimanded because of it. The following day, I of course experienced psychological distress, confusion, anxiety. Then myself and the 4 other Marines received an unscheduled anthrax vaccine, which I'm still trying to get answers about. And then came the interrogation. Approximately a week later, back at Marine Corps Air Station Yuma, I was brought in by NCIS, Naval Crimes Investigative Service, under the pretense of unrelated allegations, theft of computers. Charges that ultimately led nowhere, but the intent was clear. We are keeping an eye on you. Following that deployment, myself and the 4 other Marines were assigned to different units. I have attempted to reach out to them, and they either I cannot locate them or they want nothing to do with disclosure, and I respect that. In the years that followed, I dealt with symptoms that many veterans in this space will recognize. PTSD, neurological irregularities, memory disruption, and like many others, I tried to make sense of it in a world that wasn't ready to hear it. And I want to end by saying that, again, I am prepared to give this testimony to Congress. I did file a report with the FBI, even though it's 29 years later, it happened on US soil, and I have still not received a response. Thank you.
So the next will be Green Beret, who is operational. Next slide. And he will share with you.
My name is Randy Anderson, former U.S. Army Green Beret, weapons sergeant. I also spent 20 years as a firefighter for the city of Las Vegas. My entire career is built on discipline and service to my community and my country. And what I'm going to share with you is something I experienced during my military training in 2014. I'm not here to tell you what I saw exactly what it was, but I'm just going to report as what I've seen that day. I was at Naval Surface Warfare Crane, Indiana, which is a weapons, high-level weapons training facility for the Navy. We were there doing some routine training, but advanced weapons training that day, or that week. A few days into the training, myself and another one of my classmates were pulled aside after class and were told we're going to see some additional stuff. Nothing at first seemed unusual about this. We were taken to another building, brought to an elevator that went down significantly further than I've experienced going down an elevator before underground. So that was notable. Once we got out, we went through some security checkpoints that were, I would say, equivalent to going through a SCIF. Dr. Greer's talked about that before. The SCIF is just like a higher level of security. So we went through something equivalent to that. And we're sanitized, take all of our electronics and watches and devices off and make sure that you're sanitized. And that's where it felt like something different was going on. After that, we walked down a hallway and were guided by these 2 gentlemen to this area that had a sign that I thought, and this has been talked about on the internet a lot, but the sign said off-world technology, which was very strange to me as well. And so I have no claim about why that sign was there. It stood out. It's something strange. We entered a room. In the first room was a metallic sphere that I saw, about the basketball-sized sphere. Now there's all this talk about spheres all everywhere, and it looked about that size of the typical sphere that you've been seeing around. It was hovering over a podium, a couple feet off the top of the podium, and it was just floating there. And it was very strange to see. And it was metallic. It was a strange metal. It looked just unnatural to me. And the other object has been nicknamed the Gauntlet, but I don't necessarily think that's what it was. It came out that way when I first told the story, and people kind of ran with that, but I don't know that that's what it was. It looked like you would pick it up by putting your arm in it, so that's why it got that kind of name. And it had some type of crystal, looked like a crystal display screen on top of it. And while I was looking at it, I saw inky black symbols start to appear above it, and I feel like I was the only one in the room that had seen that at the time, and I didn't mention it. I was new on the team at the time, and I wasn't gonna take any chance of getting pulled aside for something else. I didn't want to take any chance of getting off my team, really. So I just didn't mention that I saw that day. And we got to see this stuff. They talked a little bit about, that they recovered it from an old crash, and they talked about it pretty nonchalantly, like it was a Tuesday afternoon, and then we were brought out of there and had a quick quick debrief, and that was that. We were told not to talk about it, and we didn't. So I never was told why we were brought down there. I don't know what the purpose was, and to this day, I've never had answers to that. You want to talk about the test site stuff?
Yeah.
Since then, I've worked out at the test site. I've worked all over that facility.
Nevada.
Yeah, in Nevada, where everyone's located. I've worked all over that facility doing red team operations, which is basically for tier 1 units, we provide an enemy fight for them. There's a couple things that have happened out there. We saw a couple times, we saw orbs that were just floating around, and we were told not to talk about. And again, this isn't part of my military career, so this was different. We're just told not to talk about it, and we'd have to do extra paperwork, so all the guys kind of just hushed up about it. One green orb and one orange orb is what I saw. A triangle-shaped craft was another one I told Dr. Career about. That just kind of...
If you can put the next slide up. Hello? There you go.
Yeah. It was a little less equilateral than that. It was a little bit like more sharp triangle, but it looked a lot like that. And we saw that as going into like nautical twilight hours. And then and when I was deployed, at one point we saw some advanced drone technology, which is a little bit scary for me to talk about. But I would say, based on my experience and what I've seen, that a lot of this stuff that people mix up for UFOs is probably a lot of technology that we have, advanced technology that we have as well. That's just my experience. So that's basically everything.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, this Off-World Technology Office is a real place that he went, and it is extraterrestrial artifacts there in Indiana. So that's now on the map, and it's been handed over to investigators in the government. These triangles that you're seeing like this, some are more isosceles, some are equilateral. This one is probably a Northrop Grumman. There are others that are, the prime contractor would be Raytheon. They're anti-gravity, quote unquote, electrogravitic. They have no payload of fuel, no oil, gas, jet fuel, rockets, means of conventional propulsion, or energy. And they do not have, most of the time, nuclear reactors on them. So they're pulling energy out of what's been called the zero-point energy field, and they have an anti-gravity or mass cancellation lifter system. And those were developed from reverse engineering ET craft back around 1954 is when we had the breakthrough on that. 1 year before I was born. I'll be 71 next month. So it's been a while since we've had this tech, although most presidents and members of Congress have no idea we do. So thank you very much for sharing that. Next, I'm just going to show a clip here of my friend Carol Rosin. She was, as I mentioned before, Werner von Braun's spokesperson. And she just wants to do a little update message to all of her. She's couldn't travel right now, but she's working still with us, and she's still doing great work trying to create peace in space. That's her whole mission that Werner von Braun gave to her.
Hello, my name is Carol Rosin, and I look forward to presenting to the Congress everything that I'm going to say today at the 25th anniversary of the Disclosure Project, and what I said in the first one, 25 years ago, where I presented Werner von Braun's warning that there was going to be a faked alien threat scenario produced, and we're seeing that happen now. This is the follow-up, and it's a very simple, quick one. We have one opportunity right now to transform this whole war industry and the actual wars. We can have headlines, war is over. How? By calling on President Trump to reboot the Golden Dome into the Golden Peace Dome. We have a chance now to communicate, of course, with extraterrestrial off-planet culture beings. We're doing it. You're getting evidence of the proof of the technology and information that's being made available to us. Even President Trump is disclosing files on the UFOs. The problem with that is, at the moment, it's being presented, all of it, in the context of people saying that there's an alien threat. People are believing that fiction is fact, that lies are truth. We have a chance now to correct all of that, because in the Golden Dome are weapons at this point. It's modeled after the Iron Dome, which doesn't totally work anyway. And we have a chance now to build the Peace Through Strength Dome that President Trump knows about and put it in the right context. The new context is that we're not alone, that they come here in peace. They've proven it. They've visited many people, including myself. We now know that they come in peace, that they're coming as explorers, and we have to get in our heads, in our consciousness, in the new frequency of consciousness that many people have studied, that we can live in peace, all of us, like they do in the cosmos. And that's what we're going to do. We have to make the decision to jump into the higher frequency of consciousness that we know we have. I've learned it from working with people like Wernher von Braun, who was a visionary. We have President Trump, who's a builder. He's an architect. He's a developer. We have a chance now. All we have to do is focus with intention on Trump collecting the world leaders to sign the treaty that is mentioned also in the executive order that we hope he will present to prevent the placement of weapons in outer space that Russia and China called for many years ago, and that over 40 countries actually approved until the U.S. under a different administration pulled out. No, now we're going to be able to do this because it's in Trump's executive order, along with the support that we're calling for, and so calling him to support and do. We're expressing our support to him. We have the technology to solve that. We're going to have free energy. We're going to have all the technology making us much smarter, more spiritually oriented and aware, and we're going to have peace, world peace, from peace in space that we need to have in order to have peace on Earth. Our president is in position. He is the one. He is the disclosure president, and he's doing it. Now we just have to pray, focus, and imagine and see ourselves living around the world in world peace with all that goes with it. May we have peace in space to have peace on Earth. Thank you.
She's been fighting that fight since Wernher von Braun within a certain range for operational purposes in classified areas and programs. So with no further ado, I'd like to thank Mr. Batista and introduce him to you.
Dr. Dreher. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Batista, and I am willing to testify under oath before Congress for what I'm about to say. I'm here to speak about a series of experiences that began during my final year of active duty service as a U.S. Army Special Forces soldier. That background shaped the way I observe, assess information, and approach serious matters. I was visited by and interacted with multiple types of UAP and NHI. These were not isolated sightings. They were sustained, direct, and responsive interactions. Approximately 8 months after leaving the Army, I had become somewhat of interest while trying to figure out why this was happening to me. And eventually I was approached, evaluated, tested, and eventually recruited by a military contractor to work as a psionic asset. A psionic asset is an individual who utilizes consciousness to interact with non-human intelligence for operational purposes, including initiating contact, influencing the engagement, and facilitating proximity. This was operational contact. The concept was that consciousness could serve as an interface, and along with focused intention and specific states of awareness, you could use it to initiate or intensify contact with NHI. That basically means using consciousness to create the conditions for the interaction. The objective was to use psionic assets to attract UAP for technical exploitation, target acquisition, and downing of non-human craft, to include the recovery and reverse engineering of that technology. This was not the outcome of every contact event. In many cases, they were just observed using advanced imagery, like infrared and thermal systems. I can't discuss any methods, locations, or specific operations, but I can say this. This was not just about observing the phenomenon, it was about interacting with it in a controlled way. And after that period, I did eventually go public and work alongside an aerospace company focused on ethical and peaceful contact. At the end of the day, the interaction between consciousness and the phenomenon is real and it needs to be taken seriously. In the future, the subject will not be defined by sightings alone, by our ability to understand it and interact with it. Thanks for your time and hearing my testimony.
There's a video he took.
It's one of the
On
started playing. So this is an orb, and this was within 50 feet of my position. My team and I acquired this. This was in Florida this year, a few months ago, and you can see. Replay it again.
Yeah, you can play it. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see it. There's some sort of sphere or bubble around this, and it's acting extremely anomalous way. And we've been seeing this phenomenon for quite some time, but this was the first time we were able to get as close as we did to this. There was a limit of advance with this phenomenon. It did not want us to get closer than we did. It kept moving away from us, so we took that as a reason to not go forward. But there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Next. One thing I want to comment on this, because this is a quick trip through some complex ideas. All this is in the archive. Oil test range, Provo, Utah, and another sites on the coast of Florida, where those same systems are turned into a way to attach to and guide over extraterrestrial vehicle and then target it and strike it and knock it down with an electromagnetic pulse weapon, the very existence of which is in violation of the International Non-Proliferation Treaty, because it is a component of the EMP that comes out from a nuclear device. But in this case, it's just the signal itself, and those are used to strike these objects, and it disables them because they are 100% electronic and transdimensional. But just keep in mind that any technology, even consciousness-assisted technologies, can be used for good or for bad. And in this case, what we started in 1990 as a peaceful citizens ambassador outreach to non-human life forms from other star systems got twisted into a weapons system. And I know many people who have been in those programs. I've known about this since the early 90s. Now it's beginning to come out. There was an operator out at the Edwards complex named Jake Barber and some of his team members that came out last year who knew about those operations, who were on the retrieval teams. This is real. It sounds like science fiction, and I understand that to most people, it's a bridge too far, but you're not dealing with 20th century and 21st century technology. You're dealing with civilizations that are thousands to millions of years more advanced, and they have technologies that would all look magical to us. But that part of it, a big part of it, is the thought consciousness interface with matter and space-time. And that is what they're using for communication, but it also is used to sense them by people who are skilled, like Mr. Batista and others. And I'm glad to hear he's involved with a program now that's peaceful, but over the last 50 years, they've not been so peaceful, and they've been used to basically attach to the guidance systems, lure them over and strike them and down them. So imagine if it's like when the Iranians got that really space-age looking drone that they hacked into the system, landed it and reverse engineered it back years ago. You can look this case up. Imagine doing that with thought, consciousness, actuation, and interface. Same thing, but high-tech, very high-tech. To all the AI people, listen carefully. This is what's really coming. Conscious AI. All right. Anyway, we don't have time to go into all that, but the next whistleblower is become a very good friend of mine, Michael Herrera. He's a U.S. Marine Corps veteran. He served from June 2007 to October 2011 and did a tour primarily in Southeast Asia. Thank you, Michael.
All right, good afternoon. I just want to start out the statement saying that I'm willing to testify under oath with penalty of perjury in a public hearing from Congress, in front of Congress. I've asked for this repeatedly and still waiting. So, I am a former United States infantryman with 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. It was the most decorated infantry battalion in the Marine Corps. And at that point, we essentially, the job as infantry, you can imagine, it's humanitarian assistance, but it's also direct action through combat. So, wanted to do an exciting job, and that was exciting. So the context with this is we were called out to Southeast Asia, which is where our theater of operations were. That is the western part of Sumatra. There was a 7.6 magnitude earthquake that had struck, and that was around September 30th of 2009. We then were the only ship, which was the USS Denver at that time, that routed from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, which was attached to the 7th Naval Fleet. Then we were the only ship that was cast from there to go to the western part of Sumatra. Now, upon arriving there, my team, which was randomized, it wasn't like a set team because we were doing different things on the ship, and we were essentially put into sticks. Those sticks were then boarded onto CH-53 Super Stallions, which is a transport helicopter. They're pretty big. They're one of my favorite transport helicopters that the Marine Corps has. And that's what we inserted into. Our job at that time was to provide security for the landing zones or hasty landing zones, which you'll see as HLZs or LZs. And then we were also to facilitate and help with the aid that was being transferred to these landing sites. And we took these helicopters because some of the roads were washed out and we couldn't reach them outside of, obviously, getting helicopter inserted in was suitable. So for us, we're not going to stick out in the open. We're going to position ourselves tactically to where, one, we have the best observation possible, which is elevation. So we then decided to secure a ridgeline that was off to the side, about 150 meters or so, probably less than that. And upon looking over that ridgeline towards the north, we see the top of this thing, and it was rotating in a clockwise position and was transforming colors between light matte gray and a dark matte black. Now, when you have something that's through vegetation like that, that's very abstract. It's going to get your attention. We thought it could have been a building, it could have been something like that. At that point, I had a camera that was on me that I was taking video of some of the helicopter insertions, or at least when we were getting off the ship. And I actually had some photos I snagged of this from the top view of where we positioned on that ridgeline. Because we then saw that, the leader of our team decided that we had to go down and investigate, and so we proceeded. As soon as we got to this clearing, which is what this thing was basically occupying, and looking at the craft, you could see that it was octagonal shape. It had sharp edges, quarters. It had rivets. It had seams. You could tell it was pieced together and it was man-made. You could tell it was something that was built from one of these aerospace companies. Now, accompanying this craft, when we were converging onto the position, we were then intercepted by a team of 8 operators that were wearing black camouflage utilities that had no insignia, that had no marking, no rankings. Some of them, most of them were wearing ball caps, is what I can recall. They then searched us. They then seized our weapons. They cleared them. They took our magazines out of our pouches, dumped them, kicked them off. They kept a couple guys at standoff distance while we were searched. They took photos of our IDs, and they started to basically threaten us to say, hey, it's easy to get lost out here. You can get killed out here. You can lose you out here, things like that. And as that's going on, we were seeing these trucks come up, which look like that. They could either be Ford F-350s or they could be Toyota Tundras, up armored, and they were pulling these trailers. Now these trailers were like a miniature version of a shipping container that had mini split HVAC systems on the top of that. Now when I first saw this, I had speculated, even when I first came forward in 2023, I had speculated it was a drug running operation because of the HVAC systems. So these trucks were loading these containers, which were about 4 of them, onto the platform that's underneath this craft. Now, I only remember seeing 4 trucks, and as soon as we're going through being searched, the trucks then disappear. I think they may have went onto the backside, and that platform started to raise up. It then met with the main part of the craft right there, And as soon as it came together, it started, obviously the rotation didn't change. There was an audible hum that you could only hear, which was like a guitar amp or an electrical transformer kind of noise. Not as identical, but if you guys can understand how they would sound, this is what it exactly sounded like. And as it met with that craft, it decided to raise up, and each of the corners of this craft started to basically show a color, red, yellow, green, and blue of the window lights I can remember seeing. As soon as it cleared the tree line, it shot over to the left of us, which was towards the ocean. And that thing, obviously, it did not disturb the trees, did not produce any kind of rotor wash, did not break the sound barrier, but this thing went from thousands of miles an hour, possibly hundreds of thousands of miles an hour, instantaneously like that. It's like a spark off a grinding wheel. And it shot over to the left. Upon that craft departing, they had told us to turn around and traverse back up the hill, so we did that, as they're still threatening us, wanting to shoot us, things like that. And as soon as we get back to the LZ, which we trucked up the hill, went down back to where we were at, we were then accompanied by a gunnery sergeant who I've never seen before, who had a radio, and he called basically for us to get out of there. We were adjusting our gear because when they put our weapons back, they slung them on our back, basically buttstock here, and it'd be very hard to get them off of you, so we had to help each other before we decided to go back on the ship. And we were briefed by a rear admiral subsequently after that. Now my camera, they did not find in my dump pouch. Now, when we actually concluded this operation and proceeded to go on Liberty in Subic Bay in the Philippines, the first night on Liberty, I come back to the ship and I find my camera that I actually had stowed in my locker, which was secured, was on my rack. The memory card and the battery that was in it was missing. So I had then retrieved another battery out of my locker, put it in, and it wouldn't work. So that was what happened to that. Now, when we ended up going back to Camp Hansen in Okinawa, I was also met with a Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, at least that's who he presented himself as with his uniform, but he had no name tag on. I remember seeing silver jump wings and seeing, obviously, a slew of ribbons. But this is the gentleman that pulled us each aside separately, threatened us with execution because of treason, because of disclosing this information. The NDA that he forced us to sign, I remember having to put my social security number. It had TSSCI on it, and it had Indonesia as the only things I could recall. I signed it. Now, I want to make something very clear. These NDAs are not legal by any means. I have not had any kind of repercussions legally. This is the reason why I decided to testify to ARROW. This is the reason why I decided to testify to Senate Select Committee of Intelligence as well as Senate Armed Services. And I've yet to have any legal ramifications from doing so, which is why this is public. So if there's anybody out there who is worried about that, rest assured, as long as it's something that falls under this umbrella of unconstitutional and illegal, you're going to be fine. We can help you with that. So at the time, as I came forward in 2023, I was approached by a couple of senior operators that were out west of the United States. And they had provided a context to me with evidence, as well as showing me a few things going out there, that this was not for drugs. These were psionic assets that they were recruiting from Indonesia. Now, they'll say it's a psionic recruitment operation, but it's still human trafficking. Okay, they had humans that were in these containers. And the reason why they were doing this is because there is something about third world countries that have people that are more enlightened and more consciously adept, which is what they want. And what I mean by they are these illegal, unconstitutional legacy programs. Now, I also want to make another distinction between this, that a lot of the people in these programs are not evil people. They have been hoodwinked for decades until they find out that they're a part of something that could be monstrous and potentially criminal. In a lot of cases, it is. So, since having that happen and providing that to me, and then to go back and tell people like him, as well as some people in the government that I'm working with, as well as federal law enforcement. So this is an ongoing problem. I'm not going to get into how I know this, but just understand that it is an ongoing problem. The other ongoing problem too is obviously ARROW. When they had put out my testimony through volume 1 of the ARROW report that they released to Congress and the public, they completely misconstrued my testimony. They said that I saw an extraterrestrial spacecraft, and I was intercepted by a team of U.S. special operators. First of all, I didn't know who these guys were. I didn't know what their backgrounds were until these operators that have participated in similar operations, not exactly like this, but have knowledge of it, they then clued me into what they really, how they plucked them, what their testing was, how they get through this. So, obviously, that information has been handed over to federal law enforcement. If you guys can put the next slide, please. So this is an aftermath of obviously a downing of a non-human intelligent vehicle or ET vehicle, that they were using some of these psionic operators, like you just heard from, out in some remote parts of certain areas of the United States, where they then are targeting collectively, and they are downing these extraterrestrial spacecraft with these EMP weapon systems, which you can see right here. If anybody's curious about what brand it is, it's called Epirus, and it's a Leonidas. That is what the systems are using. They use them for drone warfare, or deterrence. Well, to dual purpose. So the people that produce those more than likely have no idea that these are also being utilized in that fashion. So taking down ET vehicles and using psionic assets to lure them in and to do that. So this is the reason why we're bringing this up. This is the reason why I've testified, because after getting this information, providing evidence, seeing these things firsthand to an extent, is the reason why I'm trying to get this solved as well. Because I could live with the fact that they were actually drugs in those containers. That would have been fine. But then hearing that it's humans and it's a psionic recruitment operation, human trafficking, I feel like my duty is to help these people that are in these third world countries that are being smuggled here. And I'm going to continue to do so, and I'm going to assist it until we solve this problem. Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen.
So I know this is some disturbing information. I call it disclosure PTSD.